Well, Fox News contributor Trey Gowdy went off the Fox News script and called out the horrific laws being pushed for and in so many cases implemented across the country as it pertains to reproductive rights. We're marking the 51st anniversary of Roe v. Wade yesterday. And during a discussion about that on Fox News, we got something sort of unexpected. As I said, from Trey Gowdy. He's a former Republican congressman and had this to say.
I tell you what we do have a sense of is most Americans do not want women or doctors imprisoned when it comes to the issue of abortion. And when you have state legislators like one in my home state who are advocating for the death penalty for a rape victim who decides not to carry the child, then that is a political loser. So Republicans used to say this is a state issue. Now it got to the states and you got crazy legislators proposing things like the death penalty. Most Americans, you can criticize Roe versus Wade all you want, but most Americans had come to some peace that this is what the law is.
And most Americans currently hold the pro-abortion rights position, according to both the polling and the results of recent elections where the issue was on the ballot. But despite this, we've seen truly dangerous and harmful laws passed across the country by Republicans. I'll show you in a little bit another clip from Fox News of Steve Doocy, this time echoing the strength of Democrats' message going into the election on this issue. But I do want to review what Gowdy mentioned in terms of his home state. And he's from South Carolina, where they currently have a 6-week abortion ban before many women even know they're pregnant. And as he referenced, there was an effort to go further in the state. NBC News reports in March of 2023, South Carolina Republicans are pushing legislation that would make a person who undergoes an abortion subject to the state's homicide laws, which include the death penalty. The South Carolina Prenatal Equal Protection Act would ensure that an unborn child who is a victim of homicide is afforded equal protection under the homicide laws of the state. The bill would define a person as an unborn child at every stage of development, from fertilization until birth. The measure, whose lead sponsor is State Representative Rob Harris, doesn't include any exceptions for rape or incest. So Rob Harris wanted the state to potentially kill women who received an abortion after being raped. Disgusting. And as I said, these radical laws are being pushed for, despite the overwhelming message being sent to Republicans from Americans that this isn't what we want. We saw somewhat recently an example of this in Ohio, issue 1 prevailing despite aggressive opposition from Republicans, a ballot initiative that enshrined reproductive rights into the Ohio Constitution, and that's a state that Trump won. We also saw rejections of anti-abortion rights ballot initiatives in Kansas and Kentucky, 2 more red states, super red states, saying no to the GOP's agenda on this subject. And I could spend so much time going through this, but there have been countless elections also that weren't direct ballot initiatives, but where candidates heavily associated themselves with reproductive rights who prevailed in part because of that. Janet Protasiewicz is one example in Wisconsin for that Supreme Court race, or Virginia Democrats holding on to control of the state Senate and winning a majority in the state House, where, again, abortion rights was a front and center issue. But again, despite this trend that's so stark and so clear, many Republican states have continued to charge forward with bans. And to visualize this, here's a visual on screen to give you a sense. The darker red is a complete or 6-week ban, and then it fades up from there, green being legal. And I'll note that right now, Florida is not dark red because we're waiting to see what the Florida Supreme Court will rule on the issue. But if they uphold Florida's 15-week ban, then immediately a 6-week ban that Ron DeSantis signed into law will take effect. Pretty frightening visual. With that being said, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are reportedly going to make an effort to put this front and center in their campaign, as they should. And Kamala Harris is going on a speaking tour to speak out on the subject of reproductive rights. And here was Steve Doocy on Fox News pointing out to his co-hosts, which they didn't love to hear, that this is a strong subject for Democrats.
Well, I'll tell you this.
Yeah.
While the Republicans are trying to figure out who the nominee is going to be here in New Hampshire and elsewhere, you know what Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are going to do this week? They've got a number of events talking about reproductive rights. Because even though we're talking about stuff like right now, ultimately what the Democrats are going to run on closer to November is Dobbs, and how former President Trump was able to get 3 justices on the Supreme Court, overturned reproductive rights. Now it's up to each and every state. It's all part of federalism, but it is such an effective tool. Every time the Democrats have run on that, they have won.
It's interesting, Margaret Brennan. Yeah.
And I'll just add this as well, Brian. I think, and we've talked about this on the couch, of the Republicans, Nikki Haley has got the best argument about Dobbs and abortion that we have heard in this
Women
cycle.
liked her response on the debate stage that
Well,
day.
which she said,
but a lot of
we're never gonna get
evangelicals
60
did not.
votes. You're never going to get 60 votes.
Yeah, she said she's for whatever can pass.
Right. And the other thing to keep in mind, reproductive rights, as you know, Steve, is a spin. Freedom. It's pro-abortion. I mean, you're pro-abortion,
right.
yeah.
Oh, you're talking about the
Yeah, I'm talking about, the way they're spinning it.
So it's not spin, and it's not really about pro or anti-abortion. It's about freedom and bodily autonomy. Because if you're pregnant and you don't want to get an abortion, that's your choice. The pro-choice, pro-freedom community is also super supportive of you. That's the beautiful thing. It's about women's freedom. And trying to act like there's some dishonest game being played by using the term reproductive rights or reproductive freedoms when the majority of Americans support abortion rights, no matter what you call it, is ridiculous on the part of Brian Kilmeade. And I mentioned that Kamala Harris is going on a tour to motivate people to vote on this issue in 2024. Here's a moment from her in her first speech of this tour in Wisconsin, where she marked the anniversary of Roe v. Wade.
These extremists want to roll back the clock to a time before women were treated as full citizens. Wisconsin to the 1800s. Just look at what happened here in this beautiful state of Wisconsin. After Roe was dismantled, extremists evoked a law from 1849 to stop abortion in this state. 1849, before women could vote, before women could hold elected office, before many women could even own property, in a state whose motto is forward. These extremists are trying to take us backward. Well, we're not having that. We're not having that.
And I do think this is going to be a winning issue for Democrats in 2024. Hopefully that means they'll get enough power and then use it to protect people's rights, follow through on the promises. We've seen Democratic governments on the state level get to work on this in many cases successfully. And hopefully eventually we'll see it on the national level as well, even though in our current era of super narrow majorities, that is going to be difficult. And I do want to remember myself and remind myself to bring this subject up more often, because obviously I'm trying to communicate to people constantly that this election is about democracy, because it is, and you're voting on whether or not we will continue to have a functioning democracy or an authoritarian leader. And I sometimes, because of that, I think can forget to shine the proper amount of light on this massively important issue being voted on in 2024 as well. Trump, by proxy, is to blame for the overturning of Roe v. Wade. And Americans need to understand that. So we got to walk and chew gum at the same time as we explain to people the importance of this election as it pertains to democracy being on the ballot. And without a functioning democracy, we can't battle out on these other issues, but also we're working to win back the rights that people deserve. Make sure to share this video to people that you think would like it. Subscribe to the channel. And if you want to go a step further, you can become a member at lukebeasleyshow.com/membership.